Good afternoon. Welcome to sixth grade art. Today we're going to be covering our first project and what we're going to do with that. My name is Mrs. Bohnenkamp. I am your new art teacher. So if you have any questions, please email me or send me a message in Google Classroom and I will address that. But we'll go ahead and jump into what we're going to start creating here in the next couple of weeks. It'll take us a little bit of time, although if you are online, it might be a little faster for you. Kind of depends on what it is you are doing. So we are going to create a comic strip based around line and expression. We are going to use things that are topics that are important to us. So we will jump into that here in just a moment. As you can see my PowerPoint slides here. What I expect for you to get out of this is you will be able to create a comic strip that reflects a personal meaning. You will also be able to revise your own artwork to show what you mean. And finally, you will be able to read artwork and relate the artwork to your own ideas that are familiar to you. So, not a lot of stuff going on there, but again, we will be able to revise your artwork so your story is clearer to the audience, whoever that may be. So, storytelling through visuals, what does that mean? Anytime we read a book or a comic or a graphic novel of any kind, all of those stories have three important things, and that is going to be your beginning, which in the story sense, that introduces all of your characters, that gives you the setting where you are, what time it is, what period you're in, such as we're in the present time in 2020, or maybe back in history in the 50s. It really depends on what you're looking into. So, introducing those things at the beginning of the story and even starting to introduce maybe the dilemma. The middle of your story has all of what I like to call the juicy stuff, right? So it'll include the action or the problem that is going to happen within your story. Your characters are dealing with the situation, with each other, or with the world, or with something bigger than that. It really just depends on what you cover your story on. And then we have the third part of storytelling, which is the end. And that is going to be the portion of your story that resolves the problem. So if there is a fight, then it was resolved, and now you're friends and you're getting along. Or maybe you're talking about climate change and people clean up and take all the plastic out of the ocean, and now the ocean is thriving. That is your ending. It doesn't always have to be on a positive note, but that is just kind of an example to show you. This next slide, again, is just kind of showing the different types of things that we read, stories that we read that are kind of comic book related. On the top left hand side, that's Marvel Comics. You get a lot of superheroes, a lot of villains, a lot of kind of fantasized things. But Stan Lee, being the artist that he was, always covered important issues such as the civil rights or any other huge things in history that happened. Archie is just another comic strip. It deals basically with everyday problems, not something out of the extraordinary. And then we also have the graphic novels, so the longer stories that have pictures to accompany them. Most of you are probably familiar and are reading these currently. Smile and Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Those are the ones that are fairly popular right now. And I know as a kid, I used to read Diary of a Wimpy Kid. So just kind of keeping that in mind, all of these stories have their beginning, their middle, and their end. But they also tell you the story through pictures. If you look at the Archie comic up on the left hand side, or I'm sorry, top right hand side here, you can see that there is not too many words to tell you what is going on with this comic strip. In fact, really, all you can do is look at the strip and kind of get a gist or feel of what is going on. It looks like there is an argument at first sight, or some sort of disagreement. But as you read the story, those little bubble excerpts here where they're talking, it gives you a little more insight as to what is happening. So before we move on to the next slide, I do want to warn ahead of time that this next comic strip deals with something, topic that is prevalent in the world. There's a lot of debate and a lot of talk about it. This artist in particular is talking about climate change and even more specifically about the Australian wildfires that happened here last year. They were still talking about them in February and talked about all the millions of animals that we lost due to the Australian wildfires. So I do want to warn that this comic strip is fairly sad, and it also ends on a sad note. But I want you to see how this artist created their images and how they used very few words to kind of give a sense of emotion and feeling and tell you a story about what they deeply care about. And I will go ahead and read the comic strip to you as well. What a tragedy. All these terrified souls. Hey, let go, little one. Death? What is going on here? Bushfires. There is no escape. It is so hard to breathe. I know, but you have to come with me now. But my friends, my family? Don't worry, they'll join you very soon. Now, as we took a look at that, what kind of feeling did that give you? Consider the thoughts that went through your head. Again, this is based off of the artist's belief and caring of this topic of the Australian bushfires and how that affected Australian wildlife at that time, which really was just this year in February. So if you think about it, how did this make you feel? How were you able to feel this with so little words on the page and on the paper? How did the images tell you the story versus just the letters? This next slide here is just a short exercise for you to try at home or in the classroom. Quickly write 3 topics that are important to you. Things such as climate change, littering, friendship, maybe a type of celebration. These topics don't always have to be something sad and catastrophic. It can be something that you celebrate and makes you feel good. But do remember that when you tell the story, you will always need to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. How would you tell this as a short story? Remember, keeping those 3 parts of building a story: the beginning, the middle, and the end. Consider the characters. How will you create them? What would they look like? How would they act? The next and final one is part of the challenge of the comic strip. Because the story is short, which is why it is called a comic strip, your challenge is to create a comic strip that is 5 to 8 panels. Panels are the rectangles or squares that you see in the story where the pictures are drawn. So 5 to 8 panels. Can you tell that story in that amount of panels? Go ahead and try. Brain share. If you ever have a question about the story that you are creating, please feel free to email me or share your story with me. I am more than happy to take a look at it and bounce ideas off to see what we come up with. Now, here in the Google Classroom, I will post the paper or worksheet that we used to create a rough draft of our comic strip. It's got a total of 8 panels, so 8 squares and rectangles that you are allowed to use. You may either use all of them or you can use at least 5 so you can tell your story in that short amount of time. What kind of visuals do you need? What are your characters doing? How are they situated in your panels? You may also design your characters in this rough draft copy. Here are just a here is a reference on how to create a comic strip at home if you ever have any free time and you can actually make a quick little book out of it. A pretty fun way to go about a difficult topic. Some students are covering things such as global warming. There's another student dealing with how they dealt with the passing of loved ones. So you are able to tackle those difficult topics. Just there is no gore, no blood, no violence, none of that included in these comic strips. Again, we are touching on topics that are important to us, but also communicating that through visuals without having to use it or resort to any of that violent scenery because again we are a school, so we don't really want to see any of that. Try to think of creative ways to depict things that you most care about if it comes down to it. And again, you can always email me if you have any questions about it. But this is about where we are in class right now. If you have any questions, any concerns, let me know. But I will post that worksheet up for you as well in case you want to print it out or you just want to follow along with drawing the squares and then making your rough draft. So thank you very much for listening to my little slideshow. I will continue adding to my explanations and demos as the time passes by and as students are creating their comic strips as well. So I'm really excited to see what you come up with. I hope